Welcome, everyone. This is Kirby Shaw, and I'm a member of the Husch Blackwell's Real Estate Development and Construction Group. I'd like to thank everyone who is attending this webinar today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. Also joining me to moderate our panel today is Chrissy Simpson, who's an attorney in the Financial Services and Capital Markets Group at the firm. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application icons for your use during the program today. I'd like to highlight a few of those icons for you. If you're having any technical difficulty, please refer to the audience technical tips on the screen or click on the help icon at the bottom of the screen. It has a question mark and provides information providing common technical issues. If you happen to be viewing the program from a mobile device, be sure to be using Safari and turn your phone landscape for optimal viewing. When the screen is landscape, you can click on the box in the lower right corner to change your layout. If you have any questions during the webcast, please submit your questions via the question box. We have about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions, and we'll try to answer all the questions during the webcast today. But if a fuller answer is needed, or if we run out of time, we will be sure to answer those questions later. In addition, we would also like this to be an interactive webinar, so we would appreciate audience participation and encourage you to submit questions. A copy of the slides used during today's presentation, as well as other resources, are available in the resource list icon that looks like a folder at the bottom of your screen. A recording of it will be available tomorrow for watching and sharing. Once available, a link of the recording will be mailed to you. This is our second webinar on our Restart, Rethink, Rebuild series, and we are excited to be talking to you today about Kansas City commercial real estate development, construction trends in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on our community. Our panelists will be sharing their outlook for various projects, including infrastructure, industrial, office, and beyond. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Chrissy Simpson, who will introduce our panelists.
Good morning. My name is Chrissy Simpson, and as Purvi mentioned, I'm an attorney also here at Husch Blackwell. We are pleased to have the Kansas Department of Commerce Secretary David Toland, Michael Collins, Managing Director at J.E. Dunn Capital Partners, and Chris Collier, Managing Director of Public Finance Investment Banking for Piper Sandler and Company. Since being appointed by Governor Laura Kelly in January 2019, Secretary Toland has overseen sweeping changes within the state's leading economic development agency. Under his leadership, the department is conducting a new economic development strategic planning process for the state. Secretary Toland has also aggressively worked to rebuild the Business and Community Development Division of the Department of Commerce, filling positions that have remained vacant for several years and reestablishing the state's presence in key domestic and international markets. He has also led negotiations on behalf of Governor Kelly that resulted in the end of the so-called border war that has gone on between Kansas and Missouri for nearly a decade. Prior to joining the team at the Department of Commerce, Secretary Toland was the first CEO of Thrive Allen County, a nonprofit coalition that works to improve quality of life and economic conditions in Allen County, Kansas. Secretary Toland also worked as an appointee of Washington, D.C. Mayor Anthony A. Williams, holding key leadership positions in the D.C. Economic Development and Planning offices. Michael Collins serves as the Managing Director for J.E. Dunn Capital Partners, LLC, the private equity commercial real estate investment subsidiary of J.E. Dunn Construction Company. As Managing Director, Michael leads the strategic implementation, investment allocation, and day-to-day management of a total project market value of $1.46 billion across 16 U.S. markets. Additionally, Michael oversees and manages the public-private partnerships and healthcare real estate project equity and debt structures and investment projects for social infrastructure, public equity, and large system higher education clients. Michael has nearly 20 years of experience in federal, state, and local government and public-private partnerships at the highest levels. Among the highlights of Michael's career is creating successful public-private partnerships, marrying intergovernmental programs to achieve economic development projects locally and nationally, and the appointment to the 2008 U.S. Department of Treasury Troubled Asset Relief Program, Asset Purchase and Policy Review Advisory. Our third panelist is Chris Collier. Chris joined Piper Sandler in 2019 and is a managing director in the Public Finance Group. He brings 20 years of experience providing financial advisory and investment banking services to governmental entities. Chris works with a variety of Missouri and Illinois municipalities on a full range of debt offerings, including general obligation, revenue, lease transactions, tax increment financing, and other short-term borrowings. His clients include cities, school districts, counties, community colleges, park districts, fire districts, and library districts. He is well-versed in all aspects of local government, school district finance, and specializes in debt structuring, bond refinancings, and capital improvement planning. Secretary Toland, we will now turn it over to you to share what trends you are seeing in the Kansas Department of Commerce.
Great. Well, thank you, Chrissy and Purvi, and I'm really grateful to Husch Blackwell for making this opportunity available today to talk about real estate trends we're seeing in the Kansas City market and across the state. And, you know, this is such an important conversation to talk about what the new normal is in our state. And I love the Restart, Rethink, Rebuild title for this, because that's exactly what we're trying to do in the state. And I know all the real estate professionals, development professionals who are on the call are doing the exact same thing. So we all know that COVID-19 has left its mark on every facet of our society and particularly our economy, and it's still leaving that mark. We're very much in the middle of figuring out what a lot of these long-term impacts are going to be. And there's no question that unemployment and business losses and all these have been profound. And I don't want to give any indication that I don't recognize or appreciate the severity of this, but I do want to provide a different narrative perhaps than what you're hearing in the media and elsewhere about the opportunities that we're seeing on the Kansas side and throughout the Kansas City region as it relates to COVID. And, there's frankly a lot of good that is coming out of a really terrible situation. And so that creates opportunities for us in the development space to hopefully build our state back to a level that far surpasses where we were pre-COVID. And so we see opportunity. I'm going to talk in three main chunks here. Got about 8 minutes to talk about broad trends by sector first. Second, I'll talk about what the state government, the Kansas Department of Commerce, is doing. And then third, mention some of the trends that we've seen from site consultants and what that kind of means. So first, in terms of trends with new projects. So businesses of all sizes first are really taking a hard look at supply chains. And it's been fascinating for us, those of us who've been doing this a while, to think back several years ago and how the concept of reshoring has been something that's been talked about for years. And some companies were taking some, they're dipping their toe in the reshoring waters, but there hadn't been a large push or a large trend to reshore. COVID has changed all of that. So many companies have seen their supply chains disrupted in ways that are profound, and it is forcing decisions to be made now about shifting production back to the United States. From the state of Kansas perspective, we think that is really good news for us because we're exactly the type of location that makes good sense for any American company that's trying to shift production back, whether it's from China or elsewhere. And I'll talk more about those reasons in a second. But that's a huge opportunity for us, and we're seeing just record calls and inquiries that are from companies that want to go ahead and make that, pull the trigger on reshoring portions of their supply chain. The next thing, if you talk about retail, so obviously brick and mortar retail was struggling pre-COVID, and COVID has just been a body blow to brick and mortar retail. But, you think about e-commerce, we're up 126% over the same time last year. And so what that means for us is opportunities around logistics, distribution, fulfillment centers. And these are natural strengths of Kansas, and they're strengths that we've worked to develop. And so you think about the geographic location, the infrastructure that we have, and that's not just about highways, that's about places like the Intermodal, the Logistics Park KC in Edgerton, and where we have made intentional decisions and efforts to deepen our strength, our prowess in distribution and logistics. And so that's really good news right now, because the companies that are expanding and growing, many of them are in this space. And so that's good news for Kansas and Kansas City. Also medical equipment and PPE. So we have a number of existing Kansas companies that were already in these spaces, that were producing critical needs items and PPE. What we've been doing at Commerce is really focus on helping them scale up and scale up quickly. So maybe they were producing 10,000 units a week of a product, and they needed to go to 120,000 units a week. So that takes money. You got to do it quickly. And we've seen business opportunities for the state. And we've really worked to first help those existing medical equipment suppliers, PPE suppliers, do more and do it fast. But the other piece has been helping, Kansas manufacturers that may have been in other spaces that saw a business opportunity to shift into producing these critical needs items. And so, the most notable example, this is a Wichita example, is with Spirit Aerosystems, which in the course of 3 weeks shifted 800 people from building 737 fuselages to building ventilators. And so they pivoted quickly, and they had the talent pool, they had the skill set, they had the equipment, they were able to do it. It's a very different product, but there's business opportunity, and they took it. And beyond business, this is something our country needed, the world needed at the time, and continues to need. And so we're doing everything that we can at Commerce to support that. So talking specifically about Commerce and state government, let me give you some numbers. So last year, between March 1 and May 1, our business development team opened 13 new economic development projects. The same period this year, March 1 to May 1, we opened 37. So we went from 13 to 37. There's two reasons for this. The first is just basic blocking and tackling. We have been rebuilding this agency after a number of years of disinvestment. And so that has meant we, for the first time, have in 6 or 7 years, we have a full business recruitment team again. So we have top-notch professionals in New York covering the East Coast, in Chicago covering the Great Lakes, in Southern California covering the Western states, Dallas for Texas, Springfield, Missouri covering the Mid-Central states, and then Kansas City. So we've once again got a full bench, and if I may say so, we've hired really well. We've hired great talent, and they're firing on all cylinders. So that's part of why our deal flow is up. But the other reason it's up is these kind of opportunities that have been created by COVID, which line up very well with the strengths that we have in Kansas and in the Kansas City region. So again, logistics, fulfillment centers, medical equipment, and supplies. So that's good news. I mentioned reshoring, and so seeing this opportunity, seeing this clear trend, what we've done at Commerce is establish the Reshore Kansas initiative, which is a targeted effort to identify manufacturers and other companies that are seeking to reshore their operations to the United States. And what we're doing is making sure that as they're making these business decisions, that they've got Kansas at the front of their mind. And so we've got aggressive outreach that's happening right now in a really targeted fashion, data-driven fashion. And that is also helping us get our deal pipeline filled. So that's good news. Third thing, cash is king. Cash is always king, but it's particularly king right now when you've got the kind of economic uncertainty that we have in the country and around the world. And so one of the things that we've been doing, and we got some good news yesterday, is we are replenishing the state's deal closing fund. It's called JCF, the Job Creation Fund, so that we've got the cash to be able to win in competitions with other states. And so this is a very nimble, flexible fund that can both help us close the deal with companies that are coming into the state from elsewhere, but also help existing companies either to retain them or to help them expand and expand quickly. The most notable use of how we've applied JCF is when we did the Hire Fund back about 2 months ago, where we were able to provide, in the matter of 6 days, 346 loans to hospitality businesses. And so we just were able to quickly pull the trigger and get that liquidity where it was needed. And so yesterday, the Legislative Budget Committee approved another $5.5 million into that fund, and we hope and expect there will be some additional dollars coming as well. So we're loading up with cash so that we can close deals. And so that's good news. At the moment, we have 151 active economic development projects representing close to 20,000 potential new jobs and about $3.5 billion in new capital investment. So these are the best numbers we've seen in a long time, in spite of a global pandemic and all the other uncertainty that we have. So that's good news. Last point. So what we're hearing from site selectors, basically, travel really remains at a minimum for many of the site consultants that we work with. There is an understandable reluctance to travel. So leadership visits have been delayed, site visits have been delayed, and as much as possible, everybody's moving to virtual platforms like what we're on today. But I think kind of the personality type of many of these site consultants is simply that they want to kick around in the dirt. They want to walk around the facility. They want to see it. They want to smell it. And, there's not necessarily full comfort with just seeing, a drone video of what the site looks like. They want to get there. And so that has led to some delays on decisions from companies that can afford to delay. And so I think we're going to see that for, several more months probably. But we have seen that with travel restrictions starting to soften at Commerce, what we've been doing is we're getting back on planes and we're getting back in the car and we're going out and hustling for business. So I was in Phoenix 4 weeks ago on a business recruitment trip. We've had our in-state business development team. We released them to go ahead and start doing site visits again around the state last week. And so we're starting to get into new normal. And of course, we're practicing all the appropriate safeguards around wearing PPE and social distancing. But our attitude has been, we got to be aggressive. We got to be first out and, make sure we're hustling for opportunity, because this window won't be open forever. And so we're trying to maximize everything that we can while it is open. So I'm going to close there and happy to take questions after the other presenters.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Toland. Michael, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate being here today and talking to this group, and humbled to be a part of this panel discussion as well. I'll be honest, I can't underscore enough some of the points that Secretary Toland had just brought up. It's actually an illustration. It's a very energized illustration of strength of where we should be, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. So as you all heard, I'm Michael Collins with J. Dunn Capital Partners. We are the private equity and project finance real estate arm of J. Dunn Construction. J. Dunn Construction, as you know, is headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri. We are actually in 22 markets nationwide. We're probably those offices are in 22 markets. We're actually in more markets from a job and construction build than we do have offices. Also, wanted to talk to you about kind of what we build in a three-part component, what J. Dunn builds and what J. Dunn Capital Partners invest in, what the market looks like right now, and then where are we going in the future. So from J. Dunn Capital Partners, we invest heavily in office, student housing, higher education, healthcare, public-private partnerships, and hospitality investments. J. Dunn Construction builds significantly in the spaces of mission critical, healthcare, education, public facilities, municipal courthouses, jail facilities, integrated police and justice facilities, as well as corporate office. So with that lens, we really are looking at many different facets when you're talking about the built environment or construction as a catalyst here in this panel. The flexibility of choice of where you work is accelerating. We all know that because most of you are probably still at home working effectively and productively at home. The Cushman and Wakefield Future of Work report, a Future of Workplace report, surveyed. Their survey said around 73% of the workforce still believes companies should embrace some level of a at-home work environment. So the workplace ecosystem is evolving as we speak. It's changing right now. No longer are we looking for a single tenant or a single location. That said, the current footprint sizes still remain steady right now in certain Class A spaces. But there are getting some tenants asking for more facilities in the future for physical distancing. So what does this all mean with regard to where are we going? The workplace ecosystem and how it's affecting J. Dunn Construction is, we actually are seeing a lot more conversations with our clients across the country, and how are we going to embrace this new work from home within the built environment from all of those types of industry clusters that we build for and clients that we build for. We're starting to see that younger generations actually are reporting more work from home challenges than ever before as well, where they actually were wanting to be more mobile. That's actually presenting some productivity challenges and actually wanting to go back into the office space or to where they're more productive. And you also have to remember from a COVID response, the younger generation, that demographic is actually not as careful in their thought process as the impact of COVID-19 as maybe some other demographics or age groups. So when you look at this, we also look at from a municipal standpoint, where are budgets going and how can construction help be a catalyst for that opportunity? And for that, we're looking at municipal budgets. We're seeing municipal budgets already being cut in current budgets, as well as future budgets in the near future. So what does that mean from a strain on construction or the opportunities there are? So we're also starting to see more design, build, finance types of projects where there's an integrated approach with the design, build, team, and structure, along with integrated finance at the beginning of the process. Actually, that's most of our work over the last 3 months have been calls upon that. Over the last 2 months, we've seen ourselves only about 9 projects that are looking to go that route. So we are starting to see more public-private partnerships, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well as what we believe that means. When we're talking about the hospitality, and I think this is something that everyone's like, oh, what's going on with hospitality? It has gone down. I think there's definitely a future. I know there's a future for hospitality, specifically hotel as well as retail. It will be changed. From the hospitality sector, Berkadia Market Commentary suggested that 19% of the delinquency happened over just this past month, the past month of May. 10% for retail sector for delinquency and payments. So we're looking at that saying, where are we going? We're seeing, in Kansas City, to put that back into perspective, Kansas City, that's very important for us because from that is our sales tax and growth from our municipal budgets. And those municipal budgets do additional projects, such as infrastructure projects in downtown Kansas City or infrastructure projects in the greater Kansas City metro area. So one of the other things that we're looking at, obviously, from construction is what is working and what's still struggling. Healthcare is probably in its most difficult situation ever than ever before. According to the American Medical Association, they listened a letter just recently to Secretary Azar of Health and Human Services. Hospitals have lost about an average of $50.7 billion per month. They're in need of additional funds because of the efforts that they did to store and provide the proper PPE equipment, as well as to reduce shut down non-elective or elective surgeries. So that has been an impact. 29 hospitals over the last of this year have filed for bankruptcy. $200 billion total loss. So what does this mean? That doesn't mean it doesn't mean that everything is going to be shifted to telehealth, because there's some risk to that when you start to talk to doctors and healthcare groups of what was the misdiagnosis. And so we're also looking at from a healthcare standpoint, what is the new norm for healthcare? What is that MOB space or community hospital space, as well as urgent care facilities? So the discussions are being shifted to actually centralize locations in regional areas and pockets that have density to where they want to build for their systems. So then it goes to, well, what does this mean from a construction standpoint as to what we're going to do in the future, or right now, which is the future? Reshoring and industrial is going to have a significant impact, we believe, in the Kansas City, greater Kansas City area, as well as the state of Kansas and the state of Missouri. The reason being is because, number one, if you recall and know, Kansas City, greater Kansas City area, both states are centrally located. The coasts are still having significant issues with regard to moving product in and out of their coasts. The Midwest is a natural hub to produce more and more industrial assets, distribution, warehousing, advanced manufacturing, and additional reshoring also. So we see that is a possibility, and we need to be aggressive on that. Kansas City and the greater Kansas City metro area, both states need to be very aggressive on that. We do believe that that's going to be something that is going to continue to be a strength. It already is a significant strength to both states' marketplaces, given where they are with the trade lanes. And so that's something that we're starting to monitor a little bit more than probably we did previously, is where is trade going to go? Where are goods and services going to go? And where are people going to need them to be dispersed for that last mile? Multifamily, public facilities, higher education in a P3 format is also something that we are starting to hear more and more about. The systems of our current clients, what can we do for higher efficiency? HVAC systems from a construction standpoint, it seems to be the biggest charge in discussion. How do we effectively eliminate specific germs and bacteria, utilizing ultraviolet C or UVC lighting in meeting spaces and between meeting spaces to make sure that they are clean for the next user. Elevator shafts and the elevators themselves, what is being moved? Is it a voice system that can actually still be listened to over your masks? As well as a new type of project delivery system that is really starting to take a turn for consideration. And that is P4, or public-private philanthropic partnerships, where the philanthropic agencies that are significant across the country are now looking to real estate as playing a role in helping create opportunities of sustainable ecosystems and opportunities for new efficient build systems for larger public facilities, as well as some semi-private facilities. So we're starting to see that discussion being percolated. I know many of you probably have not heard of a P4, and I'm not making it up, but it is something that is being very significantly looked at right now. So right now, that's kind of where we are in looking at the whole construction being a catalyst, and really looking forward to any questions here in the very near future. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Michael. A lot of very interesting and specific examples there. Chris, we will now turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Excited to be here, and thank you, Chrissy, and everyone that's involved in this webinar and panel. What I thought I'd do today is talk about how COVID-19 has impacted credit ratings on bond issues, municipal bond issues, how it's had impact on the municipal bond market in general. And these are types of projects. These are where you have funding that's going to be issued with tax exempt or municipal bonds, typically in a public offering. As Secretary Tolan talked about, as Mr. Collins talked about, you have a lot of different funding mechanisms for these types of projects. When you look at a lot of the grants that are out there, you have local grants, you have state grants, you have federal grants, you have a lot of private equity opportunities. So I think one of the opportunities, one of the benefits, depending on the type of project that you're looking at doing, you do have funding available. And I think one of the good news also to share is that the municipal bond market in general has been very stable through this process. And I think one of the things that that you see is that interest rates have kind of been disconnected for a little bit, but also you're seeing a trend that it's kind of come back with a vengeance, if you will. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about the credit rating agencies. So credit rating agencies, you have 4 different credit rating agencies to look at. You have Standard & Poor's, S&P, you have Moody's, you also have Kroll and Fitch. But really Moody's and S&P are kind of the main ones to kind of focus on. And what we've seen is that both Moody's and Fitch, or Moody's and S&P, have been very aggressive in reaching out to municipalities, looking at economic development projects, trying to figure out what impact the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders are going to have on their ability to continue making their payments. And what you see is that they're very pessimistic, if you will, on their outlook. So if you look here on this table, this was just recently published by Standard & Poor's, and it shows the impact on credit ratings COVID-19 has had on those that they cover. And so since March 24th, they've impacted, or they've revised their outlook or their credit rating on 907 transactions. Majority of these are outlook revisions. So it's not that they're changing the credit rating, that they're decreasing the credit rating, but their outlook going forward has been negatively impacted with COVID-19, as you would imagine, pandemic and the stay-at-home orders and the resulting lack of revenue. And so if you look at the 849 there that have negative outlook, 282 are within local governments. And local governments is really what's looked at on economic development type of transactions, which is a very large amount, and it's pretty unusual. As a matter of fact, we had a conference call with Moody's, I guess it was like a week ago, and they were talking about the impact that they're seeing across the board, not just here in the Midwest, but nationally. And they said that local governments as a whole, or as a group, they have put on negative outlook. And that's the first time that they put that sector in negative outlook since 2008, 2009 with the financial crisis. So they're being very aggressive in looking at these transactions. We also have seen Standard & Poor's reach out to our clients who have these types of projects and asking some very pointed questions. You know, some of the questions that they're asking about has to do with how their revenue has changed from pre-COVID-19 to post-COVID-19. Now, it's very short amount of time. I mean, most of the revenue that comes in, it's usually lagged a month or two. And so they don't quite have a full sense of what the impact has been. But Standard & Poor's and Moody's have been really focused to make sure to get out in front and say, okay, are these types of transactions, or is there going to be impact on them? For your projects, and you're looking to do new projects, one of the things that you just want to make sure of is that you're aware of this undertone that rating agencies have on these projects. And really what we're looking at are more of the retail type of transactions that you might be contemplating. You want to make sure that you have a good broad sense of what the types of projects are and who the tenants are that are going to be in that project. You know, we call them the big six, if you will, of types of retail clients that still are very attractive to investors and also rating agencies. So, you know, the big six being Walmart, Target, Costco, Sam's, Home Depot, Lowe's. So those are kind of the big box, multi-functional different retail clients that really we've been able to see, and tracking wise, that they've been able to withstand the pandemic, and looking at different kinds of revenue, that they've been able to hold their fort, if you will, and kind of move forward. And so, so the rating agencies are looking at the mix of clients that you have. They're looking at the revenue projections, but they're also looking at not just what your trend is over the next 2 to 3 months or 4 months. They're looking 12 months to 18 months out. And they're wanting to see if your budget has changed. They want to see if your how your cash flow has been coming in, what your projections are. And I think the other thing to think about, especially for new projects, is making sure that the projections are really sound, number one. And number two, that the coverage, debt service coverage, is stronger than you would have maybe prior to this pandemic. So instead of having a coverage of 1.5 to maybe 1.25 times coverage, we're seeing more and more 2 to 2.5 times coverage of being what the rating agencies are really looking at. Now, on the bad side, you have rating agencies kind of showing a negative outlook on these types of transactions. But what the next slide shows is the good news. So the good news is that there's a lot of good opportunity because interest rates are really aggressive. And so what this shows is where interest rates have been since 1990. Actually, if you extend it out, it'd be even further, that we've had this downward trajectory of interest rates. And so you did see a disruption in interest rates because of the COVID-19 pandemic and what the impact was going to be, but it still is something that's very aggressive. And so a very aggressive meaning very low interest rates and a very good time to enter the market. So if you look at the smaller box in the right-hand corner, it's kind of a blown up version of the last 12 months. And you'll see that on this graph, it shows interest rates dropping. Now, this is the bond buyer revenue index. So it's longer term, 30-year term bonds, what the average interest rate is on them. And these are A1, A plus rated is on their average credit rating. You'll see that interest rates have dropped over 9 months, dropped from 4% down to 2.75%. That's a pretty significant drop in municipal interest rates. Then, of course, you see the big fluctuation up and down in interest rates because of the COVID-19 and the impact it had on the markets. And so you see a wild kind of movement there for about a month, 2 months. But now we're kind of back to a normal kind of pace. And you'll see that interest rates continue to track downward. And so that's where I said it kind of came back in vengeance before with force, because interest rates now are, a lot lower than they were even before the pandemic started. This graph kind of shows more of what we call the yield curve. And that shows where interest rates are for a 1 year, 2 year, 10 year, 20 year, 30 year amortization. So if you look, the bottom numbers, those are years out. So the 1 through 30. And then it shows where interest rates are. I'm looking at the top graph there. So the top graph, it shows interest rates that really across the board are at historical lows. As a matter of fact, if you look at the black dotted line, that is the 10-year average of where interest rates have been. The red dotted line is more of a 5-year average. And if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it or not, but the yellow dotted line is the 20-year minimum. So over the last 20 years, this is the lowest it has been. And you'll see the blue line, which is current, is right on top of that 20-year minimum. So just to say that interest rates are at historical lows. And the other thing, the bottom two graphs there show kind of where the interest rate, the spread is between a 1 year short-term bond and a long-term bond. And so what we see is that the long-term bonds are just as low, not quite just as low, but you still pay a little bit more. But the interest rate difference between a long-term bond and a short-term bond is very small. That spread is really kind of tightened down. And so one thing that's good for your different projects that you're considering, what I would recommend, or what we kind of encourage people, is to look at spreading out those payments. If you think about the coverage is so important, so you want to be able to show that you're able to make very good coverage, and you're not being paid that penalty, or you're not paying a big penalty if you extend out from a 25-year to a 30-year, or a 15-year to a 20-year, or a 20-year to a 30-year. So those are the types of things to think about when you're structuring your payments and structuring your projects, is that you want to make sure that you do that accordingly. The next slide that I have here just kind of looks at the relative value of tax exempt versus taxable rates. And you'll see that historically, if you think about it, tax exempt interest rates have been lower than taxable treasury rates. So tax exempts are they normally run about 80% of a taxable rate. And that's what you've seen from 2015 to 2020, the last 5 years. You kind of see up and down, but in general, you see that taking place where the taxable rate is going to be higher than a tax exempt rate, which is what you would expect, because if you think about a tax exempt interest rate, the purchaser of that bond doesn't pay interest on, or doesn't pay taxes on that interest. A taxable bond, they have to pay taxes on that interest. So you would think that you'd be able to get a lower yield or lower interest rate on tax exempt. Now, what you see there on the right-hand side, you see the COVID shock, right? So you see interest rates that really spiked up. So you saw a big disconnect between tax exempt municipal rates and treasury rates. I mean, it jumped all the way up to, what is that, 350% of taxable rates. So that's a very wide discrepancy. Now, things have come down quite a bit and things have stabilized, but you still see this difference between taxable rates being the same rate or higher, or lower than tax exempt, which is just opposite of what you would expect. And kind of the reason for that is just this disconnect between tax exempt and taxable markets. So for your project, one of the things to think about is maybe you could issue taxable rates versus tax exempt. You're not going to pay that big of a penalty for taxable rates versus compared to if you issue tax exempt rates, especially if you look at nominal rates. I mean, because interest rates in general are so suppressed and so much further down than they have been in the past. And so you have this opportunity to lock in long-term, perhaps taxable or tax exempt rates, depending on your project, at a very favorable market condition. And the last slide I have is basically just looking at the issuance of taxable municipal bonds. Now, the 2020 figure is a projection. So this is what Piper Sandler expects to see going into this year. You saw kind of the big increase from 2018 to 2019 of taxable interest rates, or taxable bond issues that have been issued over that time. And then we see that projection going forward. We see that kind of accelerating through the end of the year because of this disconnect that they have. So we're projecting out that you're going to have over 120 billion of taxable municipal bonds that have been issued, that are going to be issued this year. It might be a little bit less now with the issuance kind of decreasing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're seeing a big ramp up on that. And so for your projects, one of the benefits of that is that if you issue taxable, you're going to be a very favorable treatment. You're going to get a lot more investors, and it's going to be, hopefully we'll be able to gain a good amount of cost for your project. So that's kind of what I had to talk about, and I thought I would pass it on. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Chris. A lot of great information and some possible greater flexibility provided with municipal taxable bonds that we don't see all that often. Now we're going to move into our Q&A session. We do have a few questions from the audience. So I'll go ahead and start with those. And this is a question for the entire panel. If we want to go in the same order that you presented. The question is, What structures are you seeing used to be able to build and invest in properties to allow for greater flexibility in the evolving real estate landscape?
So I guess I'm up first, but I'm probably the least well equipped to answer that. I think I'm going to give that to my co-presenters, Chris and Michael. You would be better respondents there.
Thanks, Secretary. Structures build and for greater flexibility. One of the things that we're looking at is when you're looking at municipal finance or municipal projects, taxable, at one point, and I know Chris could probably talk about this even greater detail, but at one point, taxable debt, bond market debt was actually cheaper than tax exempt debt. So that greater flexibility there of, utilizing what the municipal credit rating is to go after that project and to move forward with that project with speed is still there. I'm speaking really for the public side, and I'll go to the commercial side really quickly, but for the public side, it's really just looking at what can be financeable and taking it off of their systems for public comment and public protest. If they go through a bond themselves, can they shift it over to someone else that actually can deliver the full project, give them greater flexibility, manage the process of the escalation of debt with them, as well as what does the debt look like. So even some are going towards a taxable secured loan structure as well, because they like that component. Maybe they can buy down some of the cost with the loan to cost value at maybe being between 80 to 85% or even 90% of the capital stack. So that gives them opportunity. On the private side, one of the things we're really starting to look for is really not just the build invest, but the value add market. With the value add market and core plus markets right now, specifically just value add, there's unfortunately and fortunately, there's some bad money real estate investment managers out there that actually didn't do the correct due diligence in the current market 2 months ago. And so there's options there, optionality there that will be coming online, specifically when you're looking at the hospitality market here and then probably in the next month or so, as well as what the overall CMBS market is going to do and REITs. So you're looking at, from a REIT perspective, they weren't built to last a COVID type scenario. They're doing better and they're doing well. Some of them are, but some of them are significantly struggling because of how the impact worked. So that would be all for me.
Yeah. So kind of building on that, I think you're right about the different structures where you're looking at taxable versus tax exempt. As I mentioned before, you're seeing a large amount of issuance on taxable bonds because of that disconnect between the spread difference between tax exempt and taxable. And I think also looking at projects, the type of projects, I think is very important, especially right now. If you look at the type of transactions that are being done, I think having those types of projects that can withstand more of the social distancing, if you will, maybe more outdoor facilities. If you look at perhaps if it's a retail that they can, if it's a restaurant, that they do fast food, that they can do order pickup, that they can do curbside delivery, all of that's important, as well as I mentioned before, kind of those big six type of retailers, if you will, that kind of go through to say, okay, they can withstand, because they have more of those types of a mix of retail component to withstand the stay-at-home orders. So if it's essential, we didn't really talk about grocery stores, but grocery stores are very important. Looking at like Walmarts and Sam's Clubs and Target and those kinds, those types of projects, if you can build around those have always been important in looking at these types of transactions. But I think more than ever, that's really important. And when you're looking at just kind of your overall debt, looking at if you're going to access the debt market, making sure that you have coverage is really important, that you maybe have a little bit more coverage now than what you were expecting you would have had 6 months ago, I think is important. And, as Secretary Tolan talked about, cash is king. And I think that's really important, that even on these types of transactions, that you're not over leveraged and you have more cash available and more reserves set aside to withstand future impacts that might occur.
Thank you, Chris. We don't have any more audience questions, but I do have some questions that we have prepared. So the next question is going to be for the entire panel again. And the question is, there seems to be increased talk out of Congress of a large infrastructure spending package. How can municipalities and developers best position themselves to take advantage of available funding? We'll start with Secretary Tolan for this one, and then move down the panel.
Well, I think this is just like it's always been. If you've got shovel-ready projects that are designed and ready to go, then you're going to be well positioned to be able to win these dollars and put your community and your businesses ahead. The issue right now that we're seeing is that there's so much money that's coming so fast from the feds, and it has you've got a very limited window in which to spend this. So at the state, for example, we received $1.25 billion from the CARES Act for our COVID response. And this can be used in a variety of ways, of course, on the health side and infrastructure, also economic development. So in this case, we're talking in a lot of cases about business grants, business loans. But we've got to be able to get, it's now down to $1 billion out the door, spent and done in ways that are really impactful by December 30th of this year. And so to the extent that we are able to receive proposals for projects that are ready to go and that align with the federal requirements, they're clearly going to have an advantage as we vet the many proposals that are coming in. So that would be my main point, I think.
So for 8 years, I served as a senior advisor to former U.S. Senator Kit Bond and in his Washington, D.C. office in the Appropriations Committee. And in 2008, we did a stimulus package. 2009, we did a stimulus package. Ironically, that was the same time we had a pandemic going on as well, and globally had 570,000 deaths. But the hopefully municipalities, they will receive funds because they have some significant budget issues right now. But one thing that Congress hopefully looks at when they talk about infrastructure, a lot of it's always horizontal infrastructure. And that was the mistake we made in 2008 and 2009. I think right now we need to manage and balance horizontal infrastructure, roadways and bridges, as well as mass transit, of course, but also with vertical infrastructure that the communities can get behind.
The other thing I would kind of point out is for new projects and then also perhaps even projects that are, already in the process of being developed or maybe were just recently developed. One thing to think about is to reach out to the local municipality, because what we've seen is a number of our clients that have some equity, they've had some cash or capital that they're able to put together their own small business loans to offer out to businesses and developers. And so the idea there is that they want to attract businesses, they want to attract people that live and work within their community, but they also want to have a protection for them. And so they want to be able to provide perhaps these small loans that are outside of what the federal government is providing, but is able to do it on a very quick turnaround basis. You may not have the time constraints that, where you say, oh gosh, I just missed out on this funding mechanism, right? I just missed out on that program. So I would encourage people to reach out to their local municipality to see if they have thought about or if they have any programs implemented that can help them cover some different short-term financing needs that they may have.
Thank you. Chris, actually following up on that, and this is the full panel, feel free to jump in, but do you anticipate growth out of cities in a possible increase in work from home employment, or what type of projects and infrastructures cities could be thinking about to attract people to those locations as maybe an increase in work from home availability becomes more common?
Yeah, so work at home, I do think is going to be it's here to stay, right? And so I think that you're seeing a lot of different platforms, a lot of different ways that people are able to function more effectively working from home than sitting in the interstate for 30, 40 minutes, driving to an office. And so I think that you are going to see that increase going forward. I don't think it's going to be 100% like it is now, but I do think that that's going to be kind of a push. And so with local municipals, like type of projects that they're looking to do, they still have to have their internal, a lot of water revenue type of transactions, a lot of utilities. Those types of projects are still keeping place. And then also looking at just how to provide within the local community the roads and bridges and stuff. That's all that funding is still being done. The other thing I want to point out is that at least in Missouri, they just recently had an election. They had their April election pushed from April to June. And we saw an overwhelming support for bond issues during those elections. We thought the turnout was low, as you would expect, but the people that did turn out really supported their bond issues. And so we saw, probably over a dozen clients be able to pass different tax increases and bond issues. So I think the support is still there within the community to issue those types of bonds and to look at ways that they can then support the local school district, support the local municipality for being able to do that. So, and again, going back to interest rates, they're just so low that it is a very good time to kind of lock in if you can.
So one of the things with your question is, I do think that work from home employment will be here to stay. The implications from tax and accounting purposes is going to be a very different story. What's going to happen to reciprocal agreements between states, interstates, all across the country? If you're working in a company you used to go to and you live in Texas, what is going to be the implications, the true implications from working from home? So that's going to be a key issue. I think that certain cities will thrive if they're aggressive to do so. And I think this is the time more than ever for cities like the KC Metro to be aggressive in what we do best and go after those companies, because people are still looking to possibly move away from specifically significantly dense areas. But that doesn't mean they're going to go to something that's rural either. We don't know, but we do know that there is going to be a play for still strong downtowns across the country.
And I guess I'd add that I agree with my colleagues on the fact that working from home is here to stay. I still believe very much in the power of place. And I think that the trends we've been seeing over the last 15 or 20 years around, denser types of development are also here to stay. But it's really kind of too early, frankly, to predict how all this is going to play out. I think, frankly, cities like Kansas City are really well positioned to be able to be seen as destinations of choice for people and companies that want to get off the coast, that want to go to a place with a high quality of life, with good schools, great parks, all those pieces that make people choose one community over another. And so we've got all the fundamentals here, and what we got to do now is capitalize on these opportunities, be aggressive in telling our story, shouting from the rooftops, about the opportunities that exist in the Kansas City region and the state of Kansas. And so that's what we're going to be doing from the Department of Commerce. And I know everybody on this call is doing the same.
Thank you, Secretary Tolan. It looks like we're up on time, so I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for our program today. We hope the information provided was helpful for you and your organization. If you have not already, please click on the survey icon at the bottom of your screen to complete our short survey. Your feedback assists us in providing quality future programs. And as a reminder, a recording of the webcast will be available tomorrow for watching and sharing. And once available, we will circulate that link to you. And if you have any questions that we were not able to get to, please submit those via the Q&A box, and we will make sure to answer those questions and send you a response. This concludes our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.